Always the same: fever. But servant testimonies tell a different story. Princess Aisha, married to the governor of Damascus in 1612, was discovered reading coded messages by her husband. The official chronicle says she succumbed to sudden illness, but the governor's personal physician, in a letter smuggled to Constantinople years later, wrote something that still makes my blood run cold. I was ordered to prepare a lethal dose of mercury and present it as medicine for stomach pain. She knew what it was. I saw the recognition in her eyes when I handed her the cup. She drank it anyway. Her last words were, "At least this way, my father can't say I betrayed him." She chose her father's approval over her own life. That's not love. That's what happens when a system weaponizes love so effectively that death becomes preferable to disappointing the person who should have protected you. Every single day was this deadly balance: forced loyalty to your father, inevitable betrayal of your husband, and the knowledge that one mistake, one decoded message, one moment of hesitation meant poison in your wine. Can you imagine living like that, never knowing if tonight's dinner will be your last? If this morning's kiss from your husband means he knows your secret? But even that's not the worst part. Because all of this, the exile, the espionage, the constant terror, it was all building toward one final rule. The rule that revealed the Ottoman political machine's true face. The rule that proved this system was designed to devour its own children. Rule 3. The one that determined what happened when you failed, when your husband rebelled, when the game finally went wrong. There's no warning, no trial, no chance to explain. Just silence. Just disappearance. The most common punishment had a deceptively bureaucratic name: the revocation. One day, a sealed letter from the Sultan arrives. Not for you, for your husband. 2 orders inside. First, the governor is dismissed. Second, return the asset to point of origin. That was the actual phrase they used. Return the asset. Not send my daughter home. You weren't a person anymore. You were inventory being sent back to the warehouse. But here's the detail that paralyzed every princess with existential terror. A princess who departed on a return journey never arrived at her destination. Court chroniclers meticulously recorded her departure. They never recorded her arrival. Her name simply vanished from historical records mid-sentence, like she'd been deleted from reality itself. These were political disappearances of the 16th century. And what really happened to these women? The methods were as cold as they were calculated. Golden drowning was a favorite. The princess would be taken to an empty palace along the Bosphorus, sedated with spiced wine, then thrown into the waters wrapped in luxurious silk, weighted with stones. The official story? Tragic accident. Suicide from grief over leaving her husband. The explanation was always ready before the body hit the water. But there's one case that encapsulates all this cruelty in a way that still makes historians uncomfortable. Princess Fatma, daughter of a minor sultan. When her husband was accused of disloyalty, she was the first to fall. Chronicles mention she was convinced to take medicine for her nerves. That medicine was a lethal dose of opium mixed with crushed diamonds. Read that again? Crushed diamonds. The glass-like shards would tear her internal organs, while the opium numbed the pain. Her body was returned to Constantinople in a sealed carriage. Official report? Death from mumps. But the servants who prepared her body for burial swore they saw strangulation marks on her neck and glass fragments embedded in her lips. Someone wanted to make absolutely certain she was dead. And here's what makes it exponentially worse. These weren't isolated incidents. Palace archives contain a section labeled Returned Goods, a bureaucratic ledger tracking princesses sent on return journeys. Between 1,520 and 1,680, there are 47 entries. 47 princesses departed their provincial palaces. Only 3 arrival confirmations in Constantinople. 44 names that just end. No death certificate. No burial record. No explanation. Just a final notation in neat administrative handwriting. Asset disposed of per protocol. But there was one method even more terrifying than physical elimination, something so disturbing that historians debate whether it actually existed or was just palace legend. They called it the Silent Room. In the deepest level of Topkapi Palace, there was allegedly a chamber that doesn't appear on any official architectural map. Foreign architects who worked on renovations never saw it. It was supposedly built by deaf-mute workers who were executed upon completion to ensure secrecy. Failed princesses who couldn't be openly killed were sometimes sent there. Accounts from palace administrators describe it this way: a soundproof cell with silk-padded walls. Servants brought gourmet meals 3 times daily. There was a window, but it showed a painted garden, not a real one. The princess lived in absolute luxury and absolute silence. No visitors, no letters, no sounds from the outside world. Some lasted years, some lasted decades. One archived entry from 1640 reads, Subject 7 finally expired after 23 years of confinement. Cause unknown. Body showed no signs of violence or disease. Subject appeared to have simply stopped. She forgot how to exist. Her body kept breathing, but the person inside had dissolved into silence years earlier. This was the price of Ottoman blood. Your father didn't kill you out of hatred or rage. He eliminated you for operational efficiency, because a dead daughter was less dangerous than a living princess who could become a symbol of rebellion, who could birth sons that challenged succession, who could whisper the wrong words in the wrong ears. It was the final equation of Ottoman power. A father's love was a luxury the Sultan couldn't afford, and love that couldn't be afforded was love that had to be destroyed. Systematically, efficiently, permanently. So what are we left with after peeling back these layers of institutional horror? Was the Sultan simply a monster? The answer is more disturbing than simple evil. He was a product of his own machine. The Ottoman Empire constructed a power apparatus so perfect, so mathematically efficient, that it demanded the sacrifice of its own flesh and blood on the altar of stability. Princesses weren't daughters. They were high-value political instruments. Their worth wasn't measured in their minds or hearts or dreams. It was calculated in their wombs and their capacity to be disposable intelligence assets. The tragedy of Humasha and all the silent sisters like her wasn't the stranger they married. It was realizing that the man they called father, the man who held them as infants, saw them exactly the way he saw his enemies. As pieces on a chessboard that could be sacrificed for strategic advantage. This forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. To what extent can a political system dehumanize even those who command it? The Sultan on his golden throne was as much a prisoner as his daughter in her gilded cage. He was trapped in a deadly paradox. To protect his empire, he had to systematically destroy his own family. Think about that tension for a moment. Every loving father in history has faced the balance between protecting children and preparing them for a harsh world. But the Ottoman system didn't prepare princesses for the world. It weaponized them against it. And here's the part that should keep you awake tonight. It worked flawlessly. For over 300 years, this machine produced almost 0 rebellions from within the royal family. No princess-led coups, no daughter-funded revolutions, no escape attempts that succeeded. Why? Because by the time these women were old enough to resist, they'd already internalized the cage so completely that rebellion wasn't just dangerous, it was unthinkable. They'd learned that resistance meant death. Compliance meant survival. Even if that survival was a living death, they'd been conditioned so thoroughly that when the cage door accidentally opened, they didn't run. They closed it themselves. The next time you imagine the luxury of an Ottoman princess, don't picture silk dresses or pearl necklaces or perfumed gardens. Picture a 14-year-old girl staring at her reflection on her wedding night, not seeing a bride, seeing a ghost wearing golden armor. A ghost walking toward a sentence that's already been signed by the only person in the world who should have protected her above all others. Her fear wasn't weakness or irrationality or childish anxiety. It was the most human reaction to the most inhuman machine ever constructed. A machine that proved you don't need physical chains to create the perfect prison. You just need to convince people that the chains are made of love. And her historical silence, the fact that we barely know these women's names, that their stories were deliberately erased from chronicles, that silence screams louder than any imperial monument. It screams the truth that power always tries to bury, that sometimes the most brutal violence isn't committed with swords or poisons. It's committed with wedding ceremonies and silk cages and fathers who smile while signing death warrants. These princesses are gone, their voices extinguished centuries ago, but their story remains, carved in blood and silk and institutional memory. It's a warning about what we lose when we let systems replace humanity. When we convince ourselves that cruelty is acceptable if it's efficient enough, when we sacrifice people on altars built from political necessity. If this journey into the depths of Ottoman power changed how you see history, if it made you question what luxury really means, then share this story. Because these aren't just tales from dusty archives. They're mirrors reflecting the eternal question of how far power will go to preserve itself. They show us what happens when love becomes weaponized, when family becomes battlefield, when the people who should protect us become the architects of our destruction. The Ottoman princesses can't speak anymore, but we can speak for them. We can refuse to let their silence be in vain. We can remember that behind every golden cage, there's a human being who deserved better, who deserved to be loved without conditions, who deserved to live without being turned into a weapon. And maybe, just maybe, by remembering them, we can recognize when we're building similar cages in our own time. Different materials, different justifications, but the same fundamental truth that the most dangerous prisons are always the ones decorated with gold and justified by duty. Don't let their stories fade into silence. Remember them, honor them, and make sure the world knows that sometimes the most beautiful weddings are the cruelest executions. If you want more untold stories from medieval history, stories that textbooks are too afraid to tell, subscribe to Medieval Survival right now. Hit that notification bell, because next time, I'm revealing something even darker. Something that'll make this look merciful by comparison. And trust me, you won't want to miss it.